Stay tuned for tonight's adventure with the Fat Man.
Okay, here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is. I hope it's good to be where you are because I'm really excited to be here today. My name is Baltimore Fats, and this is Back to the Future. Yeah! Actually, it's a Norse code recap to get us through the summer. Have fun, guys. All right, so the story of the Norse code began when my dear friend Dora Vernon turned me on to St. Talon's Church in Cornwall, England, which has a memorial to one Bevel Granville, knight in service to the king during the First English Civil War. Right? And I still love that dichotomy, civil war, as if wars can or should be civil. Right? But regardless, he's mortally wounded at the Battle of Lansdowne Hill, which sparked my interest because we have a Lansdowne in Baltimore. Right? So I had to know more about this guy. And digging around led me to a story that connected the Grenvilles to the current crown holders through known Viking Rollo. Right? Both of these families allegedly rolled with the Rollo at some point back in the day. And so following this story through led to a different story, a story about how geneticists were trying to erase the stereotypical Viking from history. A story now just a part of the algorithm because it's been cycled through before, as early as 2006. And some of these geneticists claim they're doing it for the betterment of humanity, right? Because these types of Vikings are racist, right? Their only cultural significance is giving idiot mouth-breathing white supremacists iconography to glorify. That's the story they're pushing anyway. But of course, it stinks to high heaven to me, right? There's a whole lot not right about this story and the way that it plays the race card. Because racism has slithered its way into almost every aspect of our lives today, right? So much so that people police themselves. They literally censor themselves out of fear of being or seeming racist in any way. And so to me and Mud City, today's racism, filled with all of this hate and violence, is a manufactured social program, right? It's only systemic because it was introduced into the system, like it was uploaded, like a virus. I personally do not believe any human being to be inherently racist, regardless of whatever race or color or creed they may be. Because, and this is a true story, right? As a white minority in a black majority city, someone who has, as a pedestrian, definitely wandered into neighborhoods he had no business being in, right? And riding the public transportation in the city the way that I do, the buses, the light rail. I mean, I have been among the people of Baltimore, and I have never once feared for my safety or felt targeted in any way because of my skin color. Even with my blindness, given Baltimore's reputation, you think someone would take advantage of that. There'd be some thug or gang member who would try to rob me or something. But it's never happened, right? It certainly hasn't happened yet. Who knows what the future may bring, But I do also kind of believe that I've been given pass to wander this land by the Lord of the Manor. But that's a story for another time, right? So getting back to it, as far as I'm concerned, fear and hatred about race are taught, right? These are learned responses. And so the original idea behind the Norse code was to explore this, right? And look into what the narrative and the gatekeepers have to tell us about who could be responsible for such an alleged racist algorithm and the other algorithms of social control paired with it. And maybe try to determine when such an alleged algorithm could have been downloaded into the mainframe, Gen Pop, right? And the initial rabbit hole had me chasing down the genetic angle of things. If Vikings weren't blonde-haired and blue-eyed, then where did all the blonde-haired and blue-eyed people come from? Right? I wanted to know. Right? So spoiler alert, right? Scientists tell us that blonde-haired and blue-eyed people are mutants.
Take that, you mutated son of a bitch!
And so, of course, I wanted to know who was responsible for this answer, right? Who's telling me that blonde-haired and blue-eyed people are mutants, right? And why should I trust them? And that's how the Norse code was poised to go, right? But before I could get out of the gate, I was kneecapped by a computer virus. And when I went back to the material, a stronger wind blew me in the direction of the peer-reviewed study that started this current oscillation of the anti-Viking program. An article called Population Genomics of the Viking World, right? And the breeze led to the foul stench that was coming from its publisher, Nature magazine. And so kind of going through the material that I had already gone through and what I was looking at, coming back to it, it just kicked off my Mud City fat senses, making me think about the staging of our history and what it might take to stage a Viking era of human history so that it matches whatever our controllers may have set up for their modern populations whose minds are going to be sponges for whatever bullshit you want to fill them with, right? You want to tell them that there were dinosaurs and cavemen, a megalithic age, a bunch of Jews in the desert, or a dude nailed to a cross, or that there were Vikings. Future populations were going to eat it up, right? Because their choices were limited. And though faking and staging history in such a way seems like an outlandish idea that would be impossible to achieve, it's hard for us to fathom that type of undertaking considering our conditioning, right? But given what is known about historical artifact forging, right, and the flaws in the testing standards used to determine the age of things, it becomes less a question of possibility, but more a question of probability, right? And those odds increase when you take a closer look at who's responsible for our modern scientific and educational systems today. From labs to schools, from research papers to textbooks, it's a list of very shady characters, right, who don't appear to have the best interests of Gen Pop at heart. And their story points to the alleged fact that our modern English educational system, scientific institutions, and radical social politics all appear to have their origins in the shadows of St. Paul's Cathedral and the Church of England. And amazingly enough, this is all connected to the story of Baltimore through Nottingham and Sherwood Forest and the Poes and the Byrons, and the idea that the creation of what we think of as culture today, music, art, drama, etc., comes from there. And this is a theory culled from the official narrative as they're presenting it, without having to go into the ideas of flat earth and mud flood and population resets at all. These are the things that make Mud City, where there is no truth, because the mainstream narrative stinks without all of this. And it's here, in the shadows of St. Paul's, that a lot of this is coming together around the juice, William Godwin, and the publishing and booksellers of Paternoster Row, Fleet Street, Ludgate Hill, and the surrounding environs, where the connections to Nottingham were shored up through the crazy influential Taylor family. And so it's here that I'm going to leave this recap. Normally I would like to do a season finale and pick up something new in the fall, but not this year, right? I'm too hot on the trail on this one, right? And so when I come back from break, which probably won't be the whole summer, hopefully just a couple of weeks, but you never know, right? It's going to be full steam ahead on the story of St. Paul's Churchyard and their book-selling monkey business. All right, more likely than not, starting with the absolutely incredible story of the Johns Murrays. And so stay tuned for the next spine-breaking episode. Remember, guys, just because you don't know the truth doesn't mean you can't have fun with the lies, right? So until the next one, cheers. All right, so a real quick cherry for this one. All right, when I was setting up that Back to the Future joke, I didn't realize that the farm he crashed into was called Peabody Farm, which of course immediately made me think of the Peabody Institute and George Peabody. So perhaps in some way connecting Back to the Future to Baltimore, right? Which I think is pretty amazing. All right, so that's it for this one. Have a great summer, guys.